I welcome you, dear viewer, to the second installment of this wonderful story. In the first part, we stopped at the moment when Mike tried to stop this beast from the last effort, but he did not succeed much. I think you're wondering what happened next, so let's digress a little and continue watching this wonderful story. Let me remind you that we have an exclusive community on Patreon, where we have already posted the full version of this wonderful uncensored story in video and text format. So you can follow the link in the description or in the upper right corner and watch the full version. I will also note that this story is posted for educational purposes only, so that any of my viewers can think about the fidelity of their spouse and warn themselves in advance against bad consequences. Now let's get started. Unfortunate wishes. Chapter 2. He sighed as he heard her answer. You told me yourself that you wanted to spend the evening with Gerald. As soon as you walk out the door, I will be forced to assume that you have chosen adultery over our marriage. At that point, you have to realize that I can do whatever I want with whomever I want. You know that, don't you? Are you absolutely sure you can handle it? Because whatever happens next is up to you, and only you. She began brushing her long blonde hair. Of course I'm okay with that. It's what I want for both of us. I promise it will make our marriage stronger. Mike only shrugged his shoulders in submission. He tried. The doorbell rang again. It was only 6:15. Liz looked flushed. Tell that asshole to wait, damn it. She walked into the bathroom, smiling to herself. For once, she was in control of the situation. Let's see him ruin it for her. As Mike was leaving the bedroom, a voice came from the front door. Mike, did you order a girl? Then another voice, probably from outside, seemed angry. Mike walked down the stairs, shaking his head. Tonight couldn't be pleasant, but he hadn't expected it to turn out so strange. As he approached the hallway, he heard Ariana's voice. I'm sorry, madam, but I can't let you in. You're not expected. She turned as she heard Mike's footsteps behind her. She bowed as he approached. Sorry to bother you, sir, but this lady insists you're expecting her, but she's not on your schedule. Ariana wasn't usually this submissive and uncomplaining in the office, but then she wasn't dressed in an outfit from some movie. Mike could barely take his eyes off her. She looked totally bloody, stunning. Her entire outfit seemed to be made up of huge patches of honey-colored material. The effect was far more seductive than the lingerie his wife wore. Trying to keep his composure, he looked at the thin woman standing on the doorstep. GED sent me, she wheezed. He said a nice girl nearby would help you calm down. Oh, he replied. If she's so good, why does he want my wife? At that moment, her eyes widened. Turning, he saw that Jas had joined them in the hallway, dressed as scantily as her mother, but in lemon silk. She stood with her head bowed, clasping her hands together in front of her. She was as much a vision as her mother. We await your pleasure, sir. May I serve you food? Whispered Jas. He could have sworn he could hear the blood pulsing through his body. However, he pulled himself together and managed to utter a coherent sentence. Yes, Yasmin. I'll be eating in the dining room today. Serve my food there and open the wine. Yes, sir, she replied. Then she bowed her head and slipped into the kitchen. He watched her back every inch of the way. May I help her, sir? Her mother asked in a sweet, sensual, submissive voice. Jesus, she was just like her daughter. Please, he replied, pleased at the unexpected turn and happy to play along with her. Ariana followed her daughter into the kitchen, covering her face with her veil as she went. Aha! He thought as it hit him. That's in case Liz comes down. She won't recognize them, and the rules say I'm not supposed to introduce them. He turned to the stunned woman at the door, who was trying to come to terms with the unexpected scene playing out before her. I'll tell you what, he said. My wife has a date with your old man, and I'm sure she won't mind giving you a ride home in her cab, because you're certainly not needed here. He let her in and told her to wait at the door. He went and found his Disney princesses in the dining room. They found Liz's spice kit and did something with the stew that took him out of his previous, rather mundane, incarnation. Apparently, Liz had higher priorities today than satisfying her husband's palate. The food was beautifully served, the table was set, the wine was poured, and the ladies looked stunning, standing on the other side of the table, facing the door, and seemingly waiting for the opportunity to fulfill his every whim. That's exactly how Liz discovered them when she came downstairs. "What the hell is this?" she demanded. "Well, I decided to eat here today since I have guests," he said innocently. "You know what I mean." Her voice grew louder, as did her tone. There was only one thought in her mind. That bastard had done it again. "You said I could spend the evening with Ged's wife, and I said I'd rather choose my own women. Funny thing is, even though I told you I wasn't interested in his dripping seconds, she's standing in our lobby waiting to be dropped off at her her husband's with you. I've made my own arrangements, and after comparing my choices with yours, I've come to the conclusion that you and Gerald can keep her, and I'll stick to those two." "Who the hell are they?" she asked, clearly very angry. "Honey?" He smiled sweetly at her to further annoy her. "One's called To Hell With Everything, and the other is called Doing With You. You know, according to the agreement you signed to be able to spend evenings with Gerald." The doorbell rang again. He went back to his food, waving it away. "That must be your cab. Don't forget to take Gerald's wife back to his place. I don't need her." Liz stormed into the hallway in a rage and saw a thin, middle-aged woman with bleached blonde hair standing at the front door. The woman looked at her uncertainly. "Are you Liz?" she asked. "Because I have no idea who's who in this madhouse. I dressed up to have a good time tonight, because G.I.D. thought your boyfriend would want a good revenge." That was the final turning point. As Mike had said, no irrevocable boundaries had been crossed. But Liz was so consumed with her certainty that she had the right to do whatever she wanted to other men that she told the woman to button up her coat and then dragged her to the waiting car. There was an awkward silence in the dining room. Then Mike looked up and said, "Well, that was a lot more interesting than I expected." He smiled at the two women, who relaxed into their maid poses and grinned at him. Jas spoke up. "Why was she dressed like a night butterfly? I thought she was on a date." Neither Mike nor her mother could come up with an answer that made any sense, so they just left the question unasked. Mike stood up. "Look, let's share the rest of this delicious stew, and then I'll give you both a ride home." Jas looked at her mom. "Is he serious?" she asked. Ariana laughed at her confusion. "Yeah, but to be honest, I planted it on him too." She turned to him. "We're not going to let you take us home, because once you're back alone, all you'll be thinking about is Liz and GED. We'll stay to keep you company until tomorrow." Mike stared at her, trying to decipher the meaning of her words. Jas walked over to him and hugged him. It felt really nice, considering she was almost dressed. "Let's go to the other room. We have a favor to ask of you." They led him into his own house and sat him down. Jas leaned forward. "I've been offered a place at Edinburgh University to study medicine starting in October. That means in less than 4 months I'll be living away from home, on my own, for the first time in my life." Jas looked sadly at her mother. "Mom had the same opportunities I had, but I came along and she chose me over her education. She was so afraid that I would make the same mistake that, let's just say she was very protective of me." She looked at Mike to make sure he understood. "To be clear, I still haven't spent my evening with anyone now, and I don't want it to stay that way when I start university. When my mom told me about her plans for the evening, I asked her if she would let me use it as an opportunity. In the end, she said yes." Mike looked at Ariana, who gestured to their outfits. "That was the whole plan at first. To get into Liz's head so that instead of her thinking you were doing something with her lover's desperate wife, and I really feel sorry for the poor woman. Now, while Liz is trying to focus on Gerald, she'll be mentally picturing you with the two of us, and I really hope it completely ruins her night." Mike grinned at her outburst. She continued. "Then Yasmin came to me with this request. As her mother, I confess I was shocked when she asked me, but as a woman, I can see her charm. You are mature, experienced, attractive, and kind. I would rather she did the deed with you than as I did." She looked embarrassed. A drunken somersault in the backseat of a car isn't exactly the nostalgic experience a girl dreams of as a teenager. Mike didn't know what to answer, and just looked at one and the other woman. "He's on our hind legs now," Jas grinned. "Should I keep going?" Mike looked helplessly at Ariana as she replied to her daughter, "You're doing fine, go on." and Jas continued. Anyway, we brought it up, and on the way here, my mom confessed to me that she hasn't had another man since my dad left her. If your wife wants an open relationship, then you're free to fix that. I can't, Mike stuttered. No matter what Liz does, we're still married. I'm sorry to have to say this to Mike, Ariana said softly. I know you too well. You gave her chance after chance to turn back, didn't you? He nodded. Despite all your entreaties, she still walked away, she continued, looking at his shocked face that nearly made her heart burst. She continued in the same soothing voice, If you sit here alone, the thought of her with another man will tear you apart, and tomorrow she'll come home, pleased with herself, and you'll be here waiting for her, betrayed, lonely, sad, and hurt. We're not gonna let that happen. You deserve better. At every turn since she started down this path, we've fought together to throw her off balance. We're not going to let you stop now. Mike looked at these two beautiful, compassionate women with tears in his eyes. The thought of her riding towards that creep, it makes me want to puke. We know, Ariana replied. But this way is better. You have to accept it. It's a given now. I'm sorry, but it's still true. She's too caught up in the fantasy she's created, too invested in this weird romantic idea that you'll somehow get turned on when she tells you what other men have done to her. Too stubborn to realize she's making a huge mistake and should turn back. But will she be just as smug when she realizes that while she was just another notch, you had an amazing evening with two women? Probably not. Will it take the shine off her obsession? Will it make her reconsider if everything she does, you end up doing better? Maybe it won't, but if you do nothing and just accept her machinations, she'll have no incentive to change, and your only options will be surrender or divorce. She looked at Jasmine. I want my daughter to have a better life than I did, and to have everything. I literally won't trust anyone to teach her, and she's had a crush on you since she was a teenager. She's 18, and I put her on the pill as soon as she was old enough, just in case. But now she wants to become a woman, and here, at this moment, you're the perfect man to help her, just as she is to help you. She smiled. I can't believe I'm about to say this. She took a deep, shuddering breath. Mike, Jas and I both need you. Mike got up and walked across the room as the women sat in silence. He knew that everything Ariana had said was true. Nothing he said could change his wife's mind. In a few minutes she would be with GD. She had abandoned her vows, ignored his protests, made her choice. What was he getting at? Would his wife think of him sitting alone, miserable, tormented by the imagination of her spreading her legs for another man? He looked at the mother and daughter sitting together in anxious anticipation. Ladies, you make a compelling argument. Would you both like to join me upstairs? The atmosphere in the cab was far less cordial. Ged's wife Sandra, GED called her our son, Liz remembered, whined almost the entire way that GED wanted her out of the house for the evening, and he would be unhappy that she hadn't succeeded in seducing Mike. She asked Liz how she was going to have fun now, while Liz and her husband were upstairs. Liz was seething for several reasons. She had spent a fortune on lingerie to show off to her new lover, only to find that this ordinary middle-aged housewife sitting in the seat next to her was wearing almost the exact same thing. In her imagination, she and Mike kissed, then broke up, then came back together to describe their feelings to each other. Instead, she found herself in the back of a cab with a whining housewife and no prospects. And if she wanted to kiss him, she'd have to rinse her mouth out first. And Mike. Okay, maybe Sandra wasn't the best publicity, but maybe if they went with other couples, sometimes the wife could be better than the husband. After all, it might have balanced things out. But Mike didn't want to engage in such a thing. He insisted on finding his own women, and Liz had to agree if she wanted to sleep with GED. But where the hell did he find those two babes? Had he cheated on me before? She'd only given him a day's notice. How the hell had he managed to arrange things so quickly? And how did he know about GED? Did he intend to ruin their relationship at work? She knew he had influence, but would he dare make himself look like a cuckold for revenge? And what the hell was GED thinking? Sending Sandra away when she'd clearly told him not to. Did he really think that was smart? Did he really do it just to piss Mike off? His stupid macho pose could have turned out badly, but he'd been so busy he'd forgotten that Mike wasn't the man to mess with. She had to take their marriage to the next level. Demonstrate trust, try new experiences, have new lovers, but still love each other. This damn fiasco was not at all what she had envisioned. Mike followed Ariana and Jas upstairs. He should have led the way, but he wanted to watch their backs as they walked. It was truly a marvelous sight. He couldn't forget that his wife intended to commit adultery tonight. The prospect that opened up before him helped take away the pain. He directed them to the second bedroom. Perhaps now they would have to give it another name. Once inside, Ariana turned to him. "I want this to be unforgettable for all the right reasons, so I can't be here. It would be," she searched for the right word, "inappropriate. I'll be downstairs. I can join you when you're ready." She stood on tiptoe and kissed Mike on the lips for the first time in her life, and then smacked her daughter on the cheek. "Oh, you're a lucky, lucky baby," she whispered, and walked away. Jas looked at Mike with a mixture of concern and anticipation. He opened his arms and she stepped into his embrace. They held each other tightly for a minute, until he felt her relax in his arms. He ran his hands down her back, savoring the softness of her skin. Her scent mesmerized him. Jas wondered a few questions. Mike pushed her away from him, and she was wary. Had she already done something wrong? She looked up, begging for another chance, but he was smiling. He tilted his head to kiss her, and she melted into his arms. Mike pulled back slightly. She lost track of time as they stood together, until... "Jas," he whispered quietly. "It's time." She was insecure, afraid her body wasn't good enough for him. Too tall, too short, too fat, too thin. She stared intently into his face, looking for some sign that he liked her, and then she breathed a sigh of relief. His face said everything she needed to know. Now she took matters into her own hands. "Can I?" She had a hard time finishing the question. "Jas," he said softly, "you can do whatever you want. Anything that gives you pleasure is fine with me. I've seen pictures, even videos, but this..." Mike smiled at her. "As much as I'd like to claim this will be the best moment of your life, I can't." She looked at him doubtfully, but accepted his assurances. She looked puzzled, and he explained. "Just follow my instructions and do what gives you pleasure. Tell me what you like and what you don't like. You won't hurt my feelings." She lay back on the pillow, and he marveled at the splendor before him. She was very much like her mother's daughter in body and appearance. Her long dark hair cascaded over the pillows. Her deep brown eyes glanced nervously from her beautiful face, with fine features. Less aristocratic than her mother's, but gorgeous in its own way. "You're so," he paused, "absolutely amazing." Suddenly, all her nerves were gone. He wasn't in a hurry. They had a whole night, and he intended to savor every bit of this feast. Dear viewer, I apologize for my spontaneous intrusion, but I'll be honest. In this moment, really a lot of hot material went to Patreon because of YouTube's sanctions to my channel, so you know that the link to the full version in the description. That's it. No more distractions. Have fun watching. She was no longer a little girl. She was a woman who knew what she wanted, and at this point, they started to slowly move on to the main course. "Take your time," he said softly. She nodded to him and lowered herself onto him with a focused face. They both felt him touch her barrier, and she paused, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Look at me," he told her. And she obeyed. She had never imagined she could feel sensations like this. They were so intense she could barely breathe. Time seemed to stop for her, and she seemed frozen in one position. It was the end for Mike, too. He was only human. Then he lay down next to her. They both lay in silence, savoring the moment until she spoke. "I don't want to move out of here, but I want my mom to be with us." Mike laughed. "Ariana, come in," he called out. The door opened, and a sheepish-looking Ariana appeared on the doorstep. She had changed back into her usual clothes. "I wasn't sure," he explained to Jas. "But you were making so much noise, I was sure." She couldn't resist making sure her girl was all right. Jas sat up and reached out her arms to hug her mom. "Oh, Mom," she whispered. "I never imagined it could be like this." Ariana replied with a mixture of pride and envy. That's exactly the impression you got. I heard you all the way down. At about this point in Ged's house, he and Liz were climbing the stairs. By a strange coincidence, Liz went first so that GED could glance at her dress and try to get his attention again. The evening hadn't started out too well. First, there was the fucking car ride with Sandra's non-stop chatter. Then GED and Sandra had a big fight over the fact that she was supposed to stay with Mike for the night. Sandra pissed Liz off by pointing out that Mike seemed to have found two exotic babes to console himself, and by the looks of it, he was in for a more exciting night than GED was having. Just as they were beginning to calm down a little, Sandra chided him again for being a damn dumbass and sending her off looking stupid after Liz had apparently told him that Mike wasn't interested in her. And why hadn't he told her that? And they were off again. Another 10 minutes wasted. Sandra then demanded an explanation of what she was supposed to be doing all fucking evening while he was playing with his new girlfriend. Eventually, GED gave her £20 to go to bingo, and she calmed down. GED and Liz then had to wait until our San went up to the bedroom to change. Awkwardly waiting until Sandra finally got out of the way, she looked around their house. It was awful. Bland and shabby decor, outdated wallpaper and carpets. But at least Sandra kept it clean. Liz wasn't sexist. GED considered cleaning a woman's job. Still, she didn't want to marry him, only spend evenings with him, so it wasn't her problem. Finally, Sandra's cab arrived to take her to bingo, and Liz and GED were finally alone. Want a drink to relax before I take you to heaven and back? Muttered GED. Liz was about to refuse, but then realized that she was actually as taut as a clothesline and agreed. GED poured them both a Bacardi and a Coke, because he said he could tell she was a classy girl. Eventually, the drinks ran out, Liz's nerves calmed, and they made their way upstairs. She kept going, no matter what. This was going to happen, no matter what. They entered the bedroom, and Liz turned to him. She was pleased to see his eyes. GED was a real man, tall, muscular, confident. Not polished and suave like Mike. He was earthy and more masculine. And she deserved this opportunity after all these years. She'd been dreaming about this for weeks. Shit, he said. You're good. With that, they finished the first session. He stepped back and turned toward the door. Would you like another drink? He asked her. It'll be about 20 minutes. He cast her a glance and went downstairs. In Mike's spare bedroom, Ariana sat at the foot of his bed, while her daughter tried to describe how she felt. Mike sat leaning against the headboard of the bed, with his arms around Jas. Ariana didn't know how she was supposed to feel being present for such a moment, but watching them together, she felt blessed that they loved her enough to let her share in their aftertaste. After a few minutes, Jas fidgeted on the bed and whispered something, which Ariana didn't catch, in Mike's ear. He smiled at her and said, If that's what you want, truth be told, I'd do anything for you right now. Jas bowed to him, said simply, That's all I want, and got out of bed. Okay, Mum, she said cheerfully. I've warmed it up for you. Now it's your turn. I'll go sort out the kitchen while you refresh your memory. Call me when you're done, and walked away. Mike and Ariana stared after her as she walked nonchalantly out the door. God help the students of Edinburgh, Mike said with feeling. We may have unleashed a monster on them. He looked at his friend. Ariana, he said softly, I know this was your idea, but I understand if this evening seems too strange for you. Just say the word, and I'll take you home. You owe me nothing, and what's more, I owe you. She looked up at him and smiled. I admit, I was a little uncomfortable sitting downstairs while you were doing that. But, she paused, trying to describe her feelings. But she was so dazzlingly happy. How could I not be happy for her? The expression on Ariana's face changed. She left this place so I could take over. If you don't want it, that's fine. But if she thinks I turned my back when I had the chance, I'll disappoint her, and I won't do that. Mike said, Then join me in my lair, he said in his best evil villain voice, for this is where I work my miracles. Ariana grinned at his levity. I'm not sure, but I wouldn't mind a good defilade if you don't mind, Wicked. Saying that, she stood up and did her business. Turning around, she saw Mike, who, leaning on one arm, was watching her. I will? she said, slowly turning 360 degrees to face his gaze. Well, he replied, I could say yes, or I could just show you, whichever you find most convincing. I must say that you are indeed a beautiful woman, and I would be delighted if you would join me. Jas was fascinated by all that was going on when she arrived. She moved to a chair in the bedroom and watched quietly. Is that what I looked like? Thought Jas to herself. Damn, but it looks so... She paused, as she couldn't find the words to describe it. Ariana was completely oblivious to the fact that her daughter was watching her. All of her attention was focused on something else. And damn, it felt good. There were no words. Words required too much concentration. She thought she heard someone's voice. Ariana, I can't hold back any longer. It was a man's voice. It must have been Mike's. Jas watched intently as they both collapsed into a sweaty heap. Jas walked over to the bed and stood over them. Please? She looked up at him. He only smiled. And something happened that I can't say here, but she'll never forget that night, ever. Meanwhile, Gerald and Liz finished their second glass and returned to his bedroom. Liz lay down on the bed and held out her arms for GED to join her. He sat down on the edge of the bed. I think you're ready now, he said softly. Liz didn't feel any different, but she managed to convince herself otherwise. This was what she wanted. This was the experience she had to share with Mike. If only he wasn't so stubborn. GED said a few words, and then he headed for the bathroom. Liz lay there for a while, waiting for him to return and thinking about what it had been like. Then GED came back into the room. I never thought, he said. I should have let you go first. Where are my manners? No, she replied in her most sultry voice. I've had enough for now. Are you ready to play some more? Jeed was a little surprised, but grinned. You really are, aren't you? All right then. One more drink break and then we'll try to get one more round in before our San gets back from bingo. Liz rolled over onto her side. Or we could just stay close by until you're ready again. She put emphasis on the word next to. GED looked unsure for a moment, then gave a short, humorless laugh. I don't. You women always want more. Who does that? He shook his head in mock despair. I'll see you downstairs. Liz stared in amazement, trying to comprehend what had happened. He, instead of staying and playing, laughed at her and went to get a drink. She went to the bathroom. When she finally got downstairs, Jed was already waiting for her with a drink. She had a lot of thoughts in her head, but she had promised one more time, so it was best not to get into an argument. But one thing she couldn't leave unanswered. What do you mean when San comes back? Now he looked uncomfortable. Well, she was supposed to be at your place all night tonight to give your old man a proper walk. I mean, she took off to bingo to give us some space. But when she gets home, she's not likely to sleep in the spare room, is she? So, what the fuck am I supposed to do? She demanded, starting to get really angry. I told you Mike wasn't interested, but instead of finding another place for us, you sent her anyway. And that was your plan? Was that fucking everything? She was almost incoherent with rage at his arrogance and stupidity. GED didn't like women talking to him, and he'd already gotten it from San, so he wasn't too pleased that Liz was the object of his attention either. I told you, he replied. We can have one more round before she gets back, and then you can have the spare room for the night. If you're not happy with that, you can just fuck off. Liz stood, paralyzed with rage and frustration. But there was no way she was going home tonight with her tail between her legs, while Mike kept the two women at home. Finally, she snapped out of her seat, turned around, and headed upstairs. As soon as she got to her bedroom, she grabbed her phone and ordered an Uber. Luckily, it was the lull period between dropping people off at late-night parties and getting them home, so she was promised to be picked up in 10 minutes. After putting on her bra, she slipped back into her dress and shoes and grabbed her bag. Thank goodness she had brought her bank cards with her. When she was dropped off, she walked down the stairs, and after wishing Jed a sincere "fuck you," she left, remembering to slam the door on her way out. Crazy bitch, GED thought as she walked away. Nice ass, though. Mike lay staring at the ceiling, his thoughts in the air. There was no way he could get rid of the thought of his wife being with another man. On the other hand, the despair he foresaw couldn't take root. His mental wanderings were interrupted when Ariana shifted and then sat up. "Good girl," she said to her daughter. "Where did you learn that?" she asked, frowning incredulously. Jas only laughed. "I didn't learn it at all. I just really wanted to touch it, and that's what happened." Ariana paused, then sighed. "This is so fucked up, but look anyway." She looked at Mike, who stared back, challenging her with his gaze. Mike already knew how good she was, but now she wasn't demonstrating. She was showing her daughter how it was done. Mike wondered for just a second if he should comment on Ayana's actions, but decided that this was mother-daughter time and he should lie back and enjoy the moment. "Ariana," he said in a voice, "Jas and I would be honored to have you participate." Ariana smiled and shook her head. "Lots of things we miss because of stupid YouTube." In less than a minute it was over for Jas, and her beloved mom graciously replaced her at the post. Meanwhile, Liz directed the driver into town and asked him to drop her off near the center. There, her clothes, though skimpy, were at least appropriate for young women heading out for an evening clubbing. She went into one of the larger stores, which was open until 10, and bought a cheap suitcase for the night, a change of underwear, toiletries, and leggings. After paying, she went to the bathroom and put the leggings on. Now she could at least book a hotel room without looking like a shop-worn fool. She'd managed to get a room at a hotel near the train station that belonged to a chain they'd used before, so she knew she'd be comfortable. When she reached her room, she took off her shoes, sat on her bed, and burst into tears of frustration. Everything had seemed so simple in her imagination. She wanted to spend the evening with GED. Mike was to enjoy an evening with Sandra. And then, in the morning, they would be together again, because that was the problem. She couldn't explain to Mike why the evening would be terrific. She was just sure it would be. If he would just trust her, everything would be fine. Of course, Sandra wasn't as beautiful as the two Mike had found. In fact, she was quite demure, though willing, and if pressed, she had to admit that GED wasn't very good looking. But novelty aside, he was a lousy lover compared to Mike, or any man she'd ever been with for that matter. Feeling sorry for herself, she showered and crawled into her lonely bed to fall asleep. When she started to fall asleep, she wondered what Mike was doing. And then she realized she was jealous. Saturday morning, Liz woke up early. She showered again to occupy her time, then got dressed and went to the pub next door to the hotel for breakfast. She needed to be out of her room by 10, so she spent some more time watching the news on the TV in her room before checking out and heading to the nearest station to catch a cab home. She felt kind of flat. It wasn't the triumphant jubilation she had expected for so long. She was going back to her husband. She ought to have felt invigorated, smartened, enlightened, but she felt none of these things. "No," she said to herself. It was all Mike and Ged's fault. If Mike had been more sensible, she might have stayed with GED longer, and the next time would have been better. If GED hadn't been such a jerk, they could have spent the night in a hotel, and everything would have been great. She would try to be more organized next time. Mike was awakened by a low murmur of voices, and then he felt the bed shift as one of his companions stood up. Opening his eyes, he saw the pleasant girl beside him. Skipping a small scene, Jas was a woman now. Their relationship would change after this, but she didn't care because no one had a claim on Mike. He was married. They each had their own reasons for being with him, and as far as she was concerned, the only loser was Liz. Ariana came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, and stood over them. "I'm starving," she announced. "And no one's going to be able to feed me anytime soon if you shower together. So, Mike, get your ass to the bathroom, and her ladyship can go in there by herself." Mike grinned, looking at his assistant. He was glad their relationship hadn't changed too much, and did as he was told. Jasmine stretched like a cat, and then looked at her mother. "Seriously, Mom, how can a woman risk losing a lover like that?" Ariana shook her head. "Honestly, I don't have a reasonable answer, dear. I know you don't have the experience to compare, but he really is that good. At university, your best bet would be to find a boy you like and teach him to be as good as Mike, because there aren't many 19-year-olds as experienced as him." Deciding they were lazy and had too much to cook, they got into Mike's car at 9:30, and drove to a small cafe bistro that was famous for its breakfast menu. When they pulled up, there was already a couple leaving, and the server cleared a table and seated them. While waiting, they studied the menu and ordered right away. Jas liked the scrambled eggs Benedict, Ariana liked the scrambled eggs with smoked salmon, and Mike insisted on the full English: sausage, bacon, black pudding, fried egg, hash browns, mushrooms, tomatoes, and baked beans, with toast. He saw the girls looking at him. "What?" he asked, looking at them innocently. "It's all because of you two. I need a lot of protein to make up for the recent losses." They all burst into laughter. When Liz got out of the cab, Mike's car was gone, but there was another car in the driveway, similar to the one that had been here the previous evening. Whose car was that, and where the hell was he? She went into the house and looked around. No one was there. The kitchen had been cleaned up. No one seemed to be sleeping on the bed, but the spare bedroom looked like it had been used. She flipped back the top cover. Her mind froze for a moment as reality hit her. With her mind, she knew that Mike had the right to do whatever he wanted with other women, but now she was faced with reality. Last night, Mike had done whatever he wanted. While she had been laughed at for suggesting that her stud might do her, Mike, oh my God. She sank heavily into the bedside chair and tried to comprehend what had happened. She was so immersed in her thoughts that she didn't hear the front door open. Mike noticed Liz's bag that she had abandoned in the hallway, but not recognizing it, realized it had to be hers. Weird, he thought, knowing she hadn't brought any bags with her. "Looks like Liz got home earlier than we expected," he said to his companions. "I know you've already stowed your bags in the car, so I'll see you on Monday," he said, looking at Ariana. He turned to Jas. "I don't know when I'll see you again, but I wish you all the best with your studies, and I won't forget our time together, ever." As he reached out to hug each of them one last time before going off to find his wife, Ariana blocked him with her hand. "Stop it. You're reacting, not thinking." He took a step back and looked at her questioningly. "Did you do something wrong?" she asked. Before he could answer, she continued. "No, I haven't. Do you feel bad that Liz found out who spent the night with you?" She saw the look on his face. "Ah, that's what it is." Mike felt himself getting defensive. "It's just that I'm so far out of my comfort zone that I have no idea how this conversation should go, so I'm quite happy to avoid it." He looked at both women in turn. "From the look on your face, I take it you said something wrong?" Ariana lowered her voice. "Look, this is your new reality, and you have to accept it. It's not like you to avoid confronting something that needs to be dealt with just because it's uncomfortable, so don't start now. Liz never introduced you to her lover, even though she was happy to put his wife in your bed, so take the initiative and just pretend." She stopped and thought for a moment. "No, you don't have to pretend anything. Just recognize that there will be other women with you and take it for granted. We're both glad she gave us a chance to be with you, and you don't seem to mind either, so accept it. And, among other things, she'll be very hurt if we all seem at ease meeting her like this, and she feels uncomfortable." He wondered. Ariana ran his office the way she did because she understood people better than he did. His genius was to recognize her abilities and trust them. He looked at Jas to see if she agreed with him or was uncomfortable. Her confident smirk spoke for itself. After all, she was her mother's daughter. He took a deep breath. "Hey, Liz," he called out. "We're back. Where are you?" Liz flinched at the sound of his voice. She was about to reply when she realized what he had said. "We're back. He never took the damn women with him, for heaven's sake, did he?" "I'll be down in a minute," she replied. Using the bathroom in their bedroom, she went downstairs and, following the sound of voices, made her way to the living room, where she found Mike explaining to an attractive young woman how the room's surround sound system was connected to the infotainment system, while an older but equally attractive woman looked on. The older woman seemed familiar to her. Mike finished his words and looked up. "Oh, hi," he said. "We didn't expect you back so early, or you could have come and had breakfast with us." He was amazed at how easy those words came to him. "I don't know if you remember Ariana, my date, and this is her daughter Jasmine." Both women smiled politely at her. Liz was absolutely delighted. Ariana broke into the conversation. I'm so embarrassed, she apologized. I would have changed the bed if I'd known you'd be home when we got back. But… She paused and shrugged. We weren't sure we were, done with it. She smiled at Mike. I think it would be a bad idea to continue this now that Liz is home, so I'll go and strip the bed. She left the room and went upstairs. Liz was still floundering when Jas smiled sweetly at her. Thank you so much for letting Uncle Mike do that. Liz shook her head silently. Uncle Mike, she thought. Jesus, that man lived most men's fantasies. Mother and daughter, hell, for 2 pence I'd have joined in myself. Mike joined in. Well, I don't want to sound insensitive, so I'll ask. Did your evening go well? Did Ged's wife join you? When she was here, she seemed… Oh, how do you put it? Oh, yes. On top of things. While Liz tried to gather her thoughts, he spoke again. But here's the other thing. I've said this before, but you ignored me. Never, I repeat, never again will any of your men's wives show up at my door. It was cruel to her, and you insulted me. Liz was so shocked that she was glad she had a question she could answer. It was all bloody Ged's idea. I told him you weren't interested in the swap, but the knucklehead went ahead with it anyway. I have no idea what he was thinking. I had no idea she was coming here, and I'm sorry. Ariana stopped on her way to the washing machine, holding the linens in her hands. If it helps, Liz, you don't have to worry about your husband being alone when you entertain the gentleman. As his assistant, I already have a list of 10 other single women between the ages of 20 and 50 who will be happy to keep him company when you are visiting. If you give me a few hours' notice, I can make all the necessary arrangements. And she headed for the back room. 10 bloody women already lined up, and that's not counting these 2. Jesus, she thought. Now she understood why he wasn't interested in Sandra. So how was your evening? Continued Mike. Liz hesitated for a moment. She'd gotten home early. She knew she wasn't glowing with satisfaction like the good teenager in front of her. She wasn't sure Mike could see the hotel bill on her card statement, and she knew he had a spy in her office. If she lied, she'd look foolish, especially if GED blabbed at work. I had a barely acceptable evening with one cretin, she admitted. Sandra went off to bingo, and frankly, I wish I'd gone with her. Jasmine looked sad. At first, Liz thought it was sympathy for her, but soon realized she was more concerned that Uncle Mike wouldn't be able to continue her education. The expression on Mike's face was more wary. And what remains after your little experiment? He asked in an even tone. He considered adding more, but decided against it. Liz tried to find an answer. I don't know, she admitted. I just needed to feel another man, and GED was there for me. Maybe if I hadn't been so desperate to get into his bed, I could have had a more reasoned conversation with you, and… She waved her hand helplessly, pointing at the chaos she'd made. The thing is, she paused to think. The thing is, I don't think I'm over it. Jas stood up and walked to the door. I think you both need some alone time to sort things out. I'll get Mom and we'll leave you 2 alone. But I'll see you again, Mike, before I leave for university. A few minutes later, after Ariana and Jas had said their goodbyes, Mike and Liz returned to the living room, and as they sat down facing each other, it was Mike's turn to start the conversation. So, Liz, he began, we need to talk. Well, here comes the end of the second part of this 2 lovebirds story. Do you think they will come to some good decision after this conversation? Or is their marriage a complete end? I will not reveal all the cards and just say that we will find out in the next part. And if you have no patience, then follow the link in the description on our Patreon and watch the full version without censorship. And now I will dive a little bit into the psychological part of this part and reveal the role of Ariana and Jas. The fact that Ariana was quick-witted and left the room reflects her understanding of the potential discomfort caused by their unexpected return. It also emphasizes her understanding of social dynamics. Jas's gratitude to Liz for allowing Uncle Mike to do what he did hints at a possible deeper connection or understanding between Mike and the 2 women. The use of family terms adds complexity to their relationship. All of this has affected Liz's mood, and she probably feels deep down that she is wrong somewhere. But whether she feels that way or not, we will find out in the next part.